In late October, Steam hosted another one of its Next Fests, a weekend highlight of some of the top games coming to Steam in the next year. I thought I'd go through a solid list of them and give my recommended takes. Most were pretty good, some not so good, and I've even included a list of the top 5 I thought were the best ones of them all. I want to stress that these are demos. Even though I might be overly critical of some of them, I only played slices of a full game. That said, this is still the only impression I have of these games, so if your demo is rough around the edges, then I'm still going to think the full game will be rough too. Just treat this with a grain of salt, because the full game might be much better. Okay, let's go.
First, we have ourselves the most basic of games, a first-person shooter reminiscent of the classics like Half-Life, Fear, and BioShock.
Come on, buddy.
Heavy emphasis on Half-Life here, though. Particularly that first one, when you were stuck inside a facility solving puzzles and putting bullets in the heads of the different enemy factions within the game's story. I can't say this game is doing anything crazy different though. The visuals are much nicer and there's definitely a sense of atmosphere here, but outside of some light weapon customization, this is pretty much a straight shooter, no pun intended.
Interesting.
I got stuck towards the end of the demo, so I didn't get to see it all the way to the end, but maybe that's for the best. It could use a little bit more time in the oven. Anno 117 forced me to find my Ubisoft Connect login in order to play this game at all. I was totally planning to put this game in the stinkers section just for that reason alone, but instead I've kept it here, in the middle tier. Mainly because the game itself is still pretty solid. If you don't know, the Anno games are basically city builders with an emphasis on a supply chain. You start out small, building farms and simple houses until eventually those farms start giving you the goods to build textiles, clothing, furniture, full productive goods that make your citizens happier, wealthier, and snobbier. This game right here is set in the classical era, where Romans and Celts and barbarians ruled the civilized parts of Europe. Fortunately, the game looks stunning. Everything from the environment to the urban sprawl feels handcrafted and addicting to build up from scratch. It's more Anno. Can't complain. Cloudheim immediately reminded me of some of the heavy-hitting releases of the last decade. Breath of the Wild, Genshin Impact, and more than anything, Palworld, surprisingly enough. The game is pretty, vast. There seems to be a lot to do too. You can explore the world much in the same way as Genshin or Palworld, collecting what seems like an endless horde of treasure chests scattered throughout the world, defeating monsters along the way. Eventually, you'll even get yourself a base to build on, signaling to me that there's more depth here than meets the eye. The story didn't seem that interesting though, so as far as why you're running around opening chests and taking monster lives, that's unclear. You don't get to make your character in this game either. Instead, you have 15 or so different styles, archetypes to pick from, with 4 classes that actually change the way the gameplay works. What is clear is that this game wants to be multiplayer, with a tinge of survival. Not sure, I'm a bit undecided on this game yet, so I'll let you be the judge. While I really liked the way this game looks, I was having a hard time finding reasons to stay. Speaking of combining mechanics from other games, Deadweight is literally just Into the Breach. That's a bit facetious, this game has a lot going on actually. It's a tactics game like Into the Breach, and just like that game, it keeps things really simple. Forget crazy ass stats and character sheets, you can either attack or push enemies. That's the fundamental mechanic of this game. Also like Into the Breach, enemy attacks can hurt other enemies, so on top of being a simple strategy game, the appeal is that this works more like a puzzle game than a board game. Your job is to abuse the enemy AI, pushing them into attacks, traps, and ledges so you can make it out of the fight without a scratch. Really, the standout feature is the visuals. I'm not the biggest fan of pixel art anymore, but even I have to admit this game is pretty.
Wow.
I'm thinking if this costs more than $30, it's probably not worth it. But if it's anything less than that, I could be picking this one up. It sure is pretty though. Forget pixels, the Effulgence RPG uses exclusive ASCII characters to design its visuals. Just look at this game. Text and numbers instead of strokes on a drawing pad to give us this particularly visually distinct game. Yeah, I know, it's the 3rd game in a row now with cool visuals. It's got some quirky writing in there too. All the enemies and companions talk to you with just a little bit of sass, which gives this game a ton of character. The gameplay itself here is like a turn-based roguelike, but there's a much bigger emphasis on luck here than in your typical roguelike turn-based RPG thingamajiggy. Every weapon has accuracy, but the accuracy depends on how far the enemy is from your party members on the screen. See? Look how it changes the further the enemy flies away. Its unique visuals are definitely the draw, and you can tell they worked a ton to make it all look nice and consistent. If this kind of thing tickles your fancy, I'd check it out. Hellmart spooked me so bad I didn't even get to the major jump scares. I chickened out. Though maybe that's for the best. Wouldn't want to spoil you out of the good stuff without playing the game yourself. This game has you run a convenience store in the middle of nowhere, with the catch being that this bitch is haunted. Half of the customers have access to laughing gas, and the solace of being the only employee of this seemingly empty convenience store is terrifying. At night, random anomalies will start to happen, eventually culminating in a whole-ass monster invading from the air vents. It's definitely got that YouTube horror thing going, where it seems like it might be more fun to watch someone play over doing it yourself, but the fact that there's this whole management portion you need to balance alongside the horrors of the void makes this a little bit more compelling than your typical YouTube horror. Sir? What? If you've ever played Mount & Blade and thought to yourself, damn, I wish everyone was beautiful. Well, here you go. The End of History is a Japanese attempt at the same exact game as Mount & Blade, except everyone has been beautified into waifus and husbandos. It hurt to read that part out loud, but it's true. This is literally Mount & Blade. If you don't know, Mount & Blade is a pretty popular cult hit that has you see through the rise of your player character in a medieval world, starting from a simple peasant or noble, building up renown, fighting bandits, making trades, and equipping yourself with armor and weapons. It's a bit hard to describe gameplay-wise because there's a ton of different systems in Mount & Blade beyond the combat and the relationship building, and the End of History is exactly that, but just prettier. Unfortunately, it's as broken as Mount & Blade 2 was on release, so this might not be a total runaway hit on day one, but I haven't seen anyone try to play into this same market, so I'll welcome any attempt. The dudes at Tailworlds could use a little fire in their ass to make Mount & Blade a little better going forward. Anime and anime-adjacent games were definitely a sizable majority in the Steam Next Fest. This one is an action game reminiscent of Nier Automata. You play as an anime girl, running around slinging combos and looking good while doing so. The magic of Nier for me was always its story though, and Homura Hime seems to be headed in a similar direction. Instead of robots, you're running around exorcising demons, except some of them seem to be exhibiting non-violent tendencies. So maybe there's something deeper going on here. Even though the game crashed, I decided to put this game in the middle tier just because it feels so interesting. And the fact that it feels just like Nier Automata. Why not treat that as a good thing? Let's take a break from comparing games to other games for a second and bring you something that feels original. Million Depth is a roguelike, but it's trying something new with its combat. You control an anime girl, surprise surprise, another anime game. But you also control this flying object thing that you build in-game using materials you collect from monsters. Big emphasis on building here. This isn't like crafting things in Minecraft. Every additional part you add to your weapon not only upgrades its stats and mechanics, but also the size, the speed, and shape of your weapon that's floating around, bouncing off enemies like a pinball game. This allows for a near infinite amount of possible designs for your weapon that are then further enhanced by the types of passives and upgrades you get like you would in a typical roguelike. The game also seems to have this melodramatic story, not too dissimilar to a Nier or a Cave story, so this game is really firing off all cylinders here. I feel like this is the one demo with the most amount of potential and originality, but it could also overcomplicate things, making it harder to get into. I don't know, you be the judge. It took me a second to understand what was going on, but eventually it clicked. Definitely look out for this one. It's a little confusing and it isn't fully translated, but it's wholly unique. I've never played anything like it. Monsters Are Coming is the newest kid on the block, that block being the recent surge in Survivors games. Vampire Survivors likes, you know the one. Hundreds of enemies on the screen, constant upgrading and evolving till eventually you're stronger than God. Well, this game centers around a fortress that coincidentally, like Million Depth before this, will shape and grow and scale based on your intentional design. It matters where you place weapons down. Weapons, in this case, work more like a tower defense than a Vampire Survivors, though you do get your own character upgrades too. Good visuals, really easy to understand, and an endless amount of unlockables to get. Try it out. Maybe it'll scratch that Vampire Survivors itch that Mega Bonk seemed to trigger not too long ago. Revelation of Decay is a top-down zombie survival game with a twang of RPG and a whole lot of Chinese. Yeah, this game isn't fully translated, and it has that Chinese jank that is pretty fun to find the first time around, till you'll realize every zombie has the same sound effect as the ones from Minecraft.
Ah, that's the zombie sound effect from Minecraft.
It's kind of overwhelming, actually. The real appeal here is that it's trying to emulate Project Zomboid of all things, with just a lot less realism. Things like superpowers and NPCs, dark forces from the void, it's all over the place. I don't think it's bad though, by any means, it's just a bit messy. The demo feels like it has a ton of content, so if you're into a more diverse experience squeezed into one game, this could be right for you. And it seems ripe for multiplayer, just a matter of time. No Players Online is a thriller mystery game that asks the player to try to understand the secrets behind a haunted tech demo of a source game similar to Counter-Strike or Quake. The guys behind this game clearly understand the source material.
Are we serious? It does the source sound effect? Nah, that's foul.
That alone sold me, and I'm a sucker for these types of semi-horror mystery games where the appeal is actually figuring out the world the game takes place in, rather than just the moment-to-moment gameplay. If you've ever played Hypnospace Outlaw, this reminds me a lot of that, except spookier.
WhiskerWood is the last game in this section.
A city building game with a focus on rats. Timberborn came out of nowhere and was like, oh my god, beavers, but this one's got rats and rat-style gameplay, and I love me a rat-style game. This game is really trying for a pure play. It wants to be a charming city builder, where everybody's an animal. You gotta harvest resources for the Empire, and if you don't, then the cat's gonna come eat you. Can't say this game is doing much else different though, so maybe worth holding off until it's on sale. But if you like these types of games, you can't go wrong with WhiskerWood. Okay, so that was the Middle Kingdoms. Now it's time for the no-no zone. Listen, I hate to bash in a game that has blood, sweat, and tears poured into it, but there's gotta be a point where you look at the banana bread you just left burning in the oven, where you decide, let's try that one again. Why am I talking about banana bread? There's been a recent trend around games centered around the concept of spot the difference. Can you make an educated guess based on the evidence before you? This is another one of those where your goal is to run a zombie quarantine zone, carefully observing for any evidence that the survivors showing up have been infected and are days from turning. This is really cool because you can use anything from searching your bodies to looking at their scans, their blood work, their facial expressions. All sorts of different evidences will key you into whether these survivors are really survivors still, or zombies in the making. This idea is really compelling because from a storytelling perspective, you have to take the decision of letting them in or liquidating the survivors. You are the one making these decisions. You can't turn them back either. You either let them in or send them to their doom. Some pretty morally dubious decision making here.
What the fuck? I didn't realize, I thought they were just gonna shoot her. Oh my god.
Everything sounds fine, right? What's wrong with this one? Well, it's everything else. You don't play as the guy checking the zombie bites. You play as the head of the entire quarantine zone. There's like 4 other responsibilities you have on top of checking bodies. You need to replenish food and gas manually by loading up carts with boxes and transporting them to their respective corners, and this part sucks. Having to move boxes one by one, who thought of this? Then you have these awful cargo missions where you deliver the survivors to another safe zone, but it's so bad. It's like Baby Man's first-person shooter. This sucks. It wouldn't be so bad if that first part of the game wasn't so interesting. Instead, I have to have my fun interrupted because there's nobody else who can carry food from one place to another. Also, how am I qualified to be shooting zombies from a helicopter? This feels like it should be someone else's job too. The devs don't seem confident in their core gameplay loop, so they've instead added filler content to make the whole game more interesting, when it really doesn't. Honestly, Quarantine Zone isn't a stinker, but I won't be buying this game if I still have to endure these awful manual labor sections that feel more like chores than anything else. This is another game where I feel bad for hating on it, but there's no way the devs can be 100% proud of what they've done here. Of Ash and Steel is a third-person RPG similar to The Witcher or Gothic. These are 2 games acclaimed for their ability to sell you on the world, to sell you on the fiction. What mattered was that the world felt real, the characters felt real, and the motivations for what you were doing all felt real. Even if there was a little bit of jank, I could still push myself through because the game underneath was functional. Unfortunately, a lot of this game is jank, the vast majority in fact. These characters are rough. The voice acting is fine, good even, but the dialogue being said and the subtitles being read are in constant fight with one another.
An ordinary day at work, so I took a little nap.
Sleeping on the job? But Des.
It's the rigging that's the most laughable. Just look at these animations. I've seen bad lip and mouth animations from Bethesda, but this is like that shit on steroids. Characters will yap at you for an eternity before you get to see any gameplay. Anything at all. The moment something interesting finally starts to happen, boom, back to yapping. Please shut the fuck up. I don't think there's a quality assurance problem here either. These seem to be intentional choices to make the game feel like a classic janky European RPG like Gothic. I am clearly not the target demographic if that's the case. This game has positive reviews on Steam, so someone seems to love it, but I don't want to hear any complaints when The Elder Scrolls 6 comes out, bugs and all. Listen, the game is at least promising from the outside. The story does seem interesting. You play as an actual character, not some customized mute freak of nature, which is a nice change of pace for a fantasy RPG, and it looks like your choices matter. You know I love when choices matter, so I could be wrong on this whole game. I'm happy to be wrong. If this game is Game of the Year and sells 6, 7 more billion copies, good for this team. I don't wish failure on anyone. But for a game that feels like it should be my cup of tea, given that I loved The Witcher, I loved Skyrim, I loved games like Fable, this should have been an easy click. But it didn't. It bored me. And that's worse than being bad. Mr. Nomad is what happens when an asset flipper throws a bunch of random genres at ChatGPT and tries to play it off as a fully fledged video game. Revolutionary concept. It's a zombie game with survival elements. Yeah, that's never been done before. But look, you start in an RV. Jesse, we need to cook. The game tells you start killing zombies, and it's like, what exactly am I supposed to get from this experience? I ran around for a little while trying to find anything that could entertain me. Well, the game told me to go look for things outside the RV, but all I found were more of these copy-pasted zombies scattered throughout the land. A well that was just jutting out of the ground from the most logical of positions, and this gas station, which you can clearly see was designed someplace else and plopped randomly with no accounting for terrain or location. I'm not sure if this was supposed to be the intended experience, but a slice of the full game. Well, this slice tastes like it was left out in the sun too long. Demos aren't really always meant to be a full picture of what the game is like, but there still felt like there was some significant work to be done on all these 3 games in order to get them into good enough shape for me to drop cash on them. As of now, not gonna happen. Let's do a 180 and talk about the bangers. These next 5 games were the only ones I wishlisted the second the demo was over. They're actually a pretty diverse set of games, from relaxing to horror, strategy to visual novel. I was genuinely surprised by these 5 in ways that the others almost reached. One thing you'll definitely notice is that these games aren't going to be your typical Game of the Year material. A lot of my personal tastes and experiences are going to come out in this top 5, so make a mental note of that. Just because I like samurai games doesn't mean you might too. That said, maybe there's something here you love too, so don't be afraid to check them out. League of Legends is, without a shadow of a doubt, my most played video game ever. This game dominated my life between middle school and university. That means my entire teenage years were spent looking at the Summoner's Rift instead of developing important life skills. The consistency by which League has stayed in the gaming mainstream is honestly impressive. Enter Teamfight Manager 2, which isn't League IP, but does attempt to emulate games of its own in-universe MOBA, obviously inspired by the likes of League of Legends and probably other MOBAs similar to it. You run a simulated esports team. The game is surprisingly simple. It's part of the appeal, especially if you come in with those MOBA instincts. You'll find yourself having quite a bit of fun getting into selecting players, picking champions, banning champions. The demo ended before I could really have any fun, but the urge to play did not go away, and that's why this game stayed in this top list. I really wanted to keep playing. I hope I can soon. This game doesn't have a release date, but it seems to be scratching an itch that I didn't even know I still had after dropping these games full time. If League of Legends or other sports management games aren't your thing, then this is an obvious skip, but if you've always wanted to play God in an esports league and you like MOBAs, this one's gonna kick ass. It's just so simple. Like, I've tried Football Manager. I've tried F1 Manager. I get overwhelmed. Not here. I already understood the systems underneath it. I just needed to execute. And frankly, it's how I like my games. Click, play, jump straight into the action. I love this one. Shadow of the Road has you control 2 samurais in the middle of the Meiji Restoration. Famously, this was Japan's period of societal transformation. from a feudal, subsistence economy of farmers to an industrial powerhouse. You know how this story goes, and yet the game has you play as the samurai anyway. As a white guy myself, yeah, this shit obviously slaps. The demo starts out with this disclaimer like, yeah, we took artistic liberties with the source material, but we really took time to research and respect Japan's history. Boom! Dudes in mechs, and fully loaded machine guns. I love these dissonant ideas when any game does this, especially when it's like intentionally ridiculous. It makes the world building feel retroactively unique. Okay, what is the game here? Well, it's XCOM. This is that strategy game I mentioned earlier, a tactics game where your goal is to carefully plan out moves and execute them based on your unit's strengths and weaknesses with respect to your enemy. On top of that, you're also developing your characters outside of combat. Decisions and dialogue will have effects on the story, and like I said, eventually you're going to start fighting other interested parties like Western powers, the Emperor's legions, other samurai, and it goes without saying that the vibe of this game is just insanely cool. It's no secret that I'm primarily driven by story in my games. If a game has a good story, I'll sit through it even if the gameplay is non-existent. High Times is a visual novel, and visual novels are typically devoid of gameplay. Dating sim visual novels even more so. This genre, or medium, just has a weird label attached to it, making it difficult to recommend. But High Times is genuinely captivating in a way that other visual novels never really managed to do so. Mind you, what's really cool is the world of High Times. The game revolves around this technology that turns food into, well, performance enhancers, just to keep this video PG. The game is called High Times, not because we're flying in the sky, but because we're high as a kite, dude. The enhancers in question come in the form of donuts. The way you create them cause different effects on the customer, and it kind of reminds me of those Papa Pizzeria games I used to play in middle school on cool math games. Remember those? Well, High Times makes that its gameplay loop, while also adding tons of character and well-written dialogue that feels natural and contemporary. Valhalla would be the one game to compare here. The heart of this game is in its dialogue and conversations. The decision you make to win over your army of customers, how you craft their specific dishes. Some of these conversations eventually could be taken a step further than just vendor-customer relationships. So if that sort of thing tickles your fancy, hey, I'd recommend High Times. It's a blast. Cairn is a game that's peaceful above all else. I don't typically go for these journey-style games where the appeal is in the serenity, maybe the chill vibes, the asynchronous multiplayer. That shit puts me to sleep. But Cairn is gripping simply because of the concept of climbing up a mountain works really well in video game form. Peak proved that. Cairn is much more tightly constructed, and playing with the controller is extremely satisfying. Every single time you move a limb from your legs to your arms, it feels like you're making steady progress, conquering each and every ledge of the mountain. It clicked in a way that games rarely do, and on top of that, it's really nice to look at. It is still funny to see all the other players climb the mountain with you. This is an optional feature, by the way, and it's not multiplayer. It's, again, more like the Shadows from the Soulsborne series, but it does still add a sense of community, and I think that's part of the message here in Cairn. I didn't pay much attention to the story, but there does seem to be one. Though to me, it's obvious that the message here is all about the journey over the destination. And yeah, I can't say I disagree. Climbing the mountain must be a lot more fun than just sitting on top of it. I'll be picking this one up for sure. Death in Abyss has to be the coolest game I played all Steam Next Fest. If you liked games like Subnautica or Iron Lung, then this is aiming for a very, very similar vibe of underwater eldritch horrors beyond your imagination. This time you actually get to blast your way through these horrors, which I'll admit may actually be the total opposite of what makes games like these interesting. That you can't directly face your fears makes those fears endlessly terrifying. While Death in Abyss is all about facing your fears, it wants you to shoot the shit out of your nightmares. But it's constantly throwing new ones at you, 24/7, and they keep getting bigger, trickier, and scarier as the game goes along. You could probably already tell from the gameplay on screen, but it plays like Star Fox, believe it or not, flying around, shooting enemies, and making sure you're not getting shot in return. If there were any reason I'd want this game to do well, it's because this genre of gaming feels like it's dying. So do yourself a solid, try this game out. Maybe it's not your cup of tea, and that's okay, because if it is, you got yourself something really cool here, and I think a lot of people are going to miss out on it. There were actually a lot more games than I could fit on this list, but the video length is getting long already, so I'll cut it right here.
If you like this video, let me know so I can keep doing these at the other Steam Next Fests. I've been thinking about making a video for Dispatch because that game is going viral recently and it's giving a lot of those The Walking Dead vibes that made Telltale so famous. Let me know what you think. Maybe I'll give that game a spin at the whole, you know, my beef with series. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep calling those videos that, by the way, but till next time, thank you for watching.